everyone. It is great to be with you as we get ready to celebrate and remember Easter together. Hopefully you're watching this on Friday. There's another video for Sunday, but if not, that's okay. Let's get into the Easter story together. And our story starts on a Sunday called Palm Sunday. Some of you might have heard of this, others might not have. That's okay. Palm Sunday is the Sunday before Easter. And it's a really important day for both Jesus and his followers and for Christians ever since. Palm Sunday remembers the moment when Jesus rode into the city of Jerusalem and was welcomed there. And it's the start of the same week that ends with Jesus going to the cross and dying and being raised back to life. That's what we celebrate on Easter Sunday. Palm Sunday, it's a really important day. It's so important for people who follow Jesus that all four Gospels talk about it. The first four books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all write about this moment when Jesus, followed by his disciples, he rides into the city of Jerusalem. And Jesus, he actually rides on a donkey. And when the people in the city, they hear that Jesus is coming, they get really excited. They want to celebrate that Jesus is there. And so this huge crowd comes out to welcome him. And as Jesus arrives, people start to lay down their coats, their jackets on the path. They get palm branches and wave them around. They say things like, "Praise the King, Hosanna, our King has arrived." And you might be wondering why people acted like this. Now to answer that question, we have to go back in time. We have to go back to look at the time of the prophets. A long time ago, you might remember some of these prophets, they had a very special job passing on God's message to God's people. And lots of them spoke about what God was doing in the world, God's promises for what he would do for the world. But other prophets spoke about a king. And they spoke about a day that God would return and a king would come to bring justice and peace to the people living in Jerusalem. And so these people back in Jesus' time, they see Jesus arriving and they start to remember these promises. They start to think maybe this is the king that the prophets had talked about. So they throw a huge parade and give him a royal welcome. They celebrate that this may be God arriving back in their city. Here is God's king. But not everybody is excited to see Jesus. Not everybody wants to celebrate. See, the religious leaders thought that Jesus was a threat to them. And even Jesus is crying as he enters the city. He's weeping because he knew that things weren't going to go the way that people had hoped. You see, people, they wanted to be saved, but they wanted to be saved from Rome. See, Rome, they're the ruling power at the time. They ruled the city of Jerusalem. And the people in Jerusalem wanted Jesus to come and save them from the Roman government, from the injustice, from the poverty that they were in because of Rome's occupation at the time. And really, they wanted Jesus to lead a rebellion. But Jesus came to save them from something far more dangerous. Something far more dangerous than Rome. Jesus came to save people from sin. And Jesus knew that in order to save everybody, he was going to have to die on the cross. And so as the week went on, people started to turn against Jesus. And then on the night before the first Good Friday, Jesus gathers with his disciples and they share dinner together. And Jesus says, "One of you is going to betray me. One of you is going to hand me over to the Romans." And so after the dinner finishes, Judas has left Jesus and his disciples. Into the night they go to a garden. And this garden was a place they had been before. It was a garden called Gethsemane. He tells his disciples to keep watch and to pray as well. And Jesus prays that another cup might be taken from him. This is a cup that symbolizes God's anger at sin. And Jesus says to his Father in heaven, is there another way for sin to be dealt with that doesn't involve me dying? But then amazingly, Jesus says, but not what I want. I will do what you want me to do. And then some leaders and soldiers arrive and Jesus is arrested. And after a night of being on trial, and despite being found not guilty, the crowd that celebrated and welcomed Jesus just a week earlier now cry out for Jesus to be killed. And that's what happened. Jesus is nailed to a cross. People mock him, they laugh at him, and as Jesus hangs there and dies, the sun goes dark. Darkness comes as Jesus suffers the punishment for sin. And then after Jesus has died, his body is taken and it's put in a tomb. A rock is placed over the entrance to seal it, and it looks like Jesus has failed. It looks like this is the end of the story, but this has just been part. But as we think about the disciples who were with Jesus, we see that things don't always go the way that we plan. This isn't what the disciples were expecting, and it probably is what we were expecting. Things don't always go the way we plan. You see, I'm pretty sure most of you didn't plan on doing schoolwork at home, on mum and dad teaching you maths or English. You didn't plan that our holidays would be cancelled, that sport would be called off. And you probably didn't plan on being stuck inside a lot of the time, looking out through your window, not able to go and hang out with your friends. You didn't plan for this. I know I didn't plan for this. Things don't always go the way that we plan. But you see, our plans don't always go with God's plans. We might think that we have some great ideas, but they're not always what God's ideas are. But at the end of the day, no matter how we think things should go, God's plan is always perfect. Sometimes it might seem like it's a little bit weird, that it's a little bit difficult, maybe it's a little bit hard to understand or to follow. And I'm sure God's plan to fix sin was definitely a surprise, but it's still perfect, even if we don't understand it at all. God's plan is always something that is worth celebrating. So even though this Easter might look very different for us, we can still celebrate God's perfect plan to fix the problem of sin.